Well, you have now all member schools planning on having some form of on-campus classes in the fall. How big of a step is that toward getting college football back?
Well, it's a huge step. Obviously, it's going to be presidents and chancellors as well as boards of trustees, boards of regents that open schools back up. And I think we're dealing with the likelihood of a new normal of some sort. Maybe that new normal is some kids going to regular classes. Perhaps they're smaller classes in conjunction with appropriate social distancing. It could affect us in the residence halls. Clearly, team meetings in virtually every sport would involve gatherings that are bigger than what is advised by the Centers for Disease Control. So, it's just got some challenges. We find ourselves in close proximity to each other in the athletics environment, and we're going to have to figure out the methodology to safely have student athletes back on campus and on our playing fields. And it's easy to forget that in March, when the house of cards became wobbly and started tumbling down, it was two NBA players who were in terrific physical condition, and they were young and in an age group that is typically not badly affected by the virus, and yet that started a chain reaction that is still going on today.
Bob Bowlsby, the commissioner of the Big 12, is with us here on The Game. Just in talking with Gene Taylor every other week here on our show, K-State's athletic director, I know there are 5 or 6 contingency plans out there that have been floated. How likely right now do you feel it is that the season will at least start on time as of right now?
Well, I think we have to have a pretty strong indication that we can get back and get going by the middle of July. If we have 2 weeks of acclimation and probably 3 or 4 weeks of preseason camp, I think we can start on Labor Day weekend. And so, I wouldn't say that July 15th is a magic starting date, but if all of our states are opened up, or even if some of them are opened up, we would try and get back to practicing and getting football and volleyball and soccer players, cross country athletes, get them reacclimated to campus and to training and do all those kinds of things. But if we get past the middle of July, there's a certain amount of time that's just going to be required to get young people ready to play. And so whenever that comes and goes, we're gonna be pushing games back deeper into September and even into October. And so at that point, we begin thinking about, well, can we play our non-conference schedule? Can we get started on Labor Day weekend? Do we start on October 1st? Do we get going early and then have a disruption during the course of the season that causes us to stop the season? Those are all contingencies that we pretty well have to do scenario planning to make sure that we're prepared, because there are just a lot of different ways that it could turn out. But to answer your question directly, I think we have a reasonably good chance of being back by middle of July and having a chance to get ready for the season. And then we're just going to have to go forward, because the virus isn't going to be gone. It's going to be present on our campuses. There will be places where we end up with hot spots. Some of them could be in the athletic environment. And, we're going to have to be making decisions in real time on some of these issues.
How much further along does the country need to be just with available testing before you guys feel like it would be okay to bring back athletics and in particular college football?
Well, I was on a call with the White House last week, and the members of the coronavirus task force were very forthcoming with information, and we were told that the number of tests available in society at large was going to double every month, and so it looks as if the trend line on getting access to both antibody testing and point-of-contact testing is improving. And so if that continues, and we're 4 months from the beginning of the football season, I think there's a reasonably good chance that we'll have access to testing. Now, in the athletics environment, are you going to test every day when they show up at the locker room? Are you going to take temperatures and monitor it that way? How are you going to go about ensuring the safety? Because you may test negative on Tuesday, and on Saturday you've been exposed, and now you're testing positive. So it's not you can certainly pre-test when young people report for practice, but you also need to test as you go. And so there's just no way to know at this point whether we will have the necessary numbers of tests, and particularly the diagnostic and analytical aspects of the test, because there are a number of steps to this, and we have to have availability in all of those areas.
Okay, so to be clear, it would have to get to that point before you guys would feel comfortable allowing football to take place?
Well, that's not a decision that I'm going to be making. That's governors' offices and public health officials are going to be making those decisions, and They will be largely made on a local basis. And in some cases, I suppose mayors are going to be making those decisions. But the high schools have to deal with the same issues. It varies from one part of the country to the other, so we aren't all uniformly situated. So I think it's really early in the process to begin forecasting along those lines.
I know Bob Bowlsby is with us, by the way, Big 12 commissioner. One thing that is just tough for me to get over, and thinking about like Rudy Gobert, when that happened in the NBA, it did shut everything down to find out that there was a positive test. And I'm sure there will be other leagues that come before you guys that you'll have a chance to look at and see how they handle this sort of a situation. But say that does come up. You have a player at Oklahoma, for instance, test positive. What is the next move there? Do you have to quarantine the team? Do you just remove the player? How much have you guys been able to work through what that protocol would be?
Well, we've hired an organization to advise us on it. They're called the Infectious Disease Control Organization, and they are experts in epidemiology and immunology and infectious diseases. They work out of the Duke University Hospital, and they advise the NFL and NBA, and I think the SEC uses them as well. So we have hired the best medical personnel available to advise us. Additionally, we've got medical schools on many of our campuses, and so we get good information on a local basis as well. And then we have a sports medicine panel that works with Ed Stewart from our staff, and they are advising us on all things medical and student athlete throughout the year. It's not just COVID. It's head injuries and keeping track of injury surveillance statistics and those kinds of things. So, what they're going to advise us on is how do you get your locker room ready? How do you get your weight rooms ready? How often do things need to be disinfected? What does it take to keep the training room in a state where you can go in there and not worry about the possibility of contracting something? What do you do with older staff members that may be more prone to have a bad reaction to the virus? How do you go about having food service in ways that are going to be so different than what we've been doing before? What do you do with housing? Do you put everybody in a single room? Do you try and put them off on an area by themselves? There are just dozens and dozens of questions that you have to work your way through, and we're doing so with the best advice that we can find. But even with proper planning, there will be things like what you described. There'll be a positive test on at Institution A within their football program, and their institutional action may be to quarantine the team for 14 days, and you're supposed to play them on Saturday. So what happens? Is it no game? Is it a forfeit? Does the team that can't show up lose? What do we do? At the end of the year, if some teams have played 6 games and other teams have played 8 games, who's the champion? Those are things that we still have to work our way through, and we will. I expect that we will know a lot more about whether or not we're going to get a green flag within 45 days. And so, we're just going about the process of trying to put as many contingency plans in place as we can, and yet realizing that the variables that go into those plans are constantly changing. And so with that kind of input, it makes the output and the planning very difficult.
Just a couple more for you here, Bob. Bob Bowlsby is with us from the Big 12, the commissioner of the league. James Franklin at Penn State, I saw today, he was advocating for, hey, even if, say, Big 12, you got 10 teams, like 8 of the 10 teams can play, but you have 2 that are in a state where they can't actually be able to play or host a game, that they should just move forward no matter what the scenario is and let those schools play that can. Is that something that you guys would be open to, or is it an all-in or all-out kind of a thing?
Well, that's the kind of thing that our athletic directors and our presidents chancellors will eventually decide. I think that, we always try and hover as closely around as we can to what we call competitive equity, having a level playing field, and that means the same number of recruiting days and the same number of practices and the same length of practice sessions. And we're a highly regulated environment for something like sports, and so I think we start out from a position of all wanting to do about the same things, and yet having said that, I think we're in unusual times, and I'm not sure we can strictly adhere to that. And so I would be, if one of our states was not going to get freed up until August 1st, but they would have to get ready quickly for the season, and if they wanted to stick to the same 6-week window to get ready, they might have to start a couple weeks late. I wouldn't care to forecast that now because it's going to be a collaborative decision. But because of the nature of what we have going, and because this is being done on a jurisdiction by jurisdiction basis, mostly at the state level, I think it will be difficult to have everybody stand down while we wait for 1 or 2 states to open up or 1 or 2 institutions open up. And that's a very unusual approach to this based upon what we try and do as a rule, and that is everybody do the same things.
Well, before I let you go, Bob, this will get off that subject just real quick, but this is a common concern that I hear from K-State fans around here is with this name, image, and likeness legislation or ruling from the NCAA that, hey, this can be an extra recruiting advantage for the haves, and it can increase the gap between the haves and the have-nots. And fans at a school like K-State worry about how much that can affect a school like K-State. How much do you foresee that changing the gap between the haves and the have-nots in college football?
Well, I don't think you can do much to change the haves and the have-nots. I mean, it's probably fair to say that it's easier to recruit to Austin, Texas, than it is to Ames, Iowa, and there are some built-in differences, and it's hard to fully equalize everybody. But the attempt on this is going to be that name, image, and likeness doesn't enter into the recruitment environment, and that it doesn't enter into the transfer environment. And that's easy to say, but it's very difficult to do. And so I co-chair the Division I Legislative Solutions Group, which is charged with taking the report that went to the Board of Governors and putting it into legislative form so that the members can look at it and vote on it. And the vision is that we vote on it next January, and that this would be implemented probably the next summer. So, there are a lot of universities that are situated the same as Kansas State is. There are many state universities, particularly land-grant universities, that are in small towns, college towns, if you will. And I think it's probably true that there could be more opportunities in larger cities than there are smaller towns. The larger cities, however, if you're at UCLA or USC, you're also up against two NFL teams and two NBA teams and some of those kinds of things. So you could make the case that the college kids kind of get lost in the shuffle relative to the professional guys. And if you're in a relatively rural area, you have the benefit of being the big show on campus and the big show in your state. And so there are places that have beautiful campuses. There are places that are easy to get to. There are places that have other advantages. And so the attempt will be to take it out of the environment of inducements. But I don't know that we can fully expect to have a level playing field on every last aspect of it, because indeed we don't have a level playing field on every last aspect of the things we're doing right now.